Hello, good morning at this webinar. My first this year, maybe yours as well. Everybody, Happy New Year. Looking forward to 2024. My name is Baerte Brey. I work at a Dutch grid operator. And of course, Dutch grid operators want to facilitate e-mobility on behalf of our shareholders, municipalities, provinces, national government. But to do this, well, we have a grid which might face some congestions with all the uptake of renewable energy and electric vehicles. So to facilitate all the electric vehicles, we have to apply a little bit of smart charging. One of the protocols for this smart charging is, of course, OCPP, Open Charge Point Protocol. But it's interesting because mobility has a big momentum. Last year, the AFIR was set in place. And in this webinar, we want to explore how does the policy of the European Commission, of national governments, with the targets of e-mobility, well, reflect in the operation of my company, a grid operator, or the organization responsible for OCPP, the Open Charge Alliance. So this webinar is all about e-mobility, about policy, the AFIR, and about what we have to do in the coming year in 2024. We have three speakers. The first is a member of the European Parliament, Nagtegaal. Secondly, Raphael Heliot from AVERE, a platform for e-mobility, a European organization. And thirdly, from the Open Charge Alliance, the alliance responsible for OCPP, Franc, Buve. Caroline, may I give you the floor for a first introduction on the AFIR, because you were a shadow rapporteur in the Parliament. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Baerte, and welcome to everyone. And of course, let's start by saying a Happy New Year. One moment, Baerte was speaking, the video was a bit frozen, but for now it's okay. So if you have any problems with me or with my video, please let us know in the chat, and I guess the organization will help. But for now it's fine, so let me start. And well, it is a webinar, so unfortunately it's not possible to ask you to raise your hand, but if I ask you the first question, and I will ask you who drives an EV, I guess a lot of people will raise their hand. And if I ask you and who is going to try to go on holidays this summer with their EV, probably a lot of you will raise his or her hand as well. And to be honest, I try to go on the summer holidays with my electric vehicle, but to be honest, it was not easy. I had a lot of payment problems, to fears of not being able to get to the next charging point. So what you see, I'm sort of an experienced EV driver, and I have been facing many issues on the road in the last, let's say, 3-4 years that I'm driving an EV car. But I'm super happy as well that the EU has actually tried to address a lot of these problems. And what we see is that with the currently revised AFIR, the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation, and Baerte refers to that as well, these issues should become, hopefully, a thing of the past. We see that the implementation of this regulation is therefore super crucial. And I hope that I can explain in a few minutes why it's so important for me, but for you and for a lot of consumers in the European Union as well. First of all, I think I should say big thanks to you all for joining, of course, this discussion, because of the fact that it is a matter of great importance for the future of the e-mobility in the whole EU. We see the challenges surrounding of the charging infrastructure. And as we strive towards greener, but also a more environmentally future, it's crucial that we address also the hurdles hindering the widespread adoption of EVs. We see that the EU has set an enormous ambitious target for reducing the carbon emissions, and transitioning towards that clean and sustainable energy sources. And what is and still is central into achieving these goals is the widespread adoption of the EVs. But this transition comes with its own set of challenges. And one of the most important being the establishment of the robust charging infrastructure. What we see is that with the AFIR, that represents a significant step forward in the transition to that more sustainable ways of moving around for the road mobility. But also, and it was also part of the AFIR, maybe some of you know that, it was also for the transport by air or by sea. But what we saw that the most expression and the most impact is for the road part. One of the key elements of this regulation is the promotion of the pan-European framework for the development of the alternative fuels, with particular emphasis on the EV charging points. So in this regard, what we see is that the regulation stipulates more the fleet-based targets and the distance-based targets. So on the latter, it means that the member states need to ensure that charging points are deployed at every 60 kilometers along the roads of our TEN-T network. And TEN-T is the Trans-European Network of Transport. And it will be in the years coming up towards 2030. As of in 2027, all charging points should clearly display the different price components. So that's the price per kilowatt, price per minute, price per session. But also the charging point should accept payments by card and contactless payments next to the possibility to pay with your subscription. So you would say that this regulatory framework is there. However, it remains important to address still the challenges we see that impede the effective deployment of the charging infrastructure. And I think it's well known to you, but the Open Charging Point Protocol, the OCPP, plays a pivotal role in this landscape by providing the standard communication protocol for the EV charging stations. This standardization is crucial for the interoperability, ensuring also that the different charging stations, but also the central management system, can communicate seamlessly. Despite the existence of the OCPP, challenge persists that hinder its full potential. Firstly, the interoperability remains a concern. While OCPP is widely accepted, variations in its implementation across the different manufacturers and operators can lead to compatibility issues. And this brings up a question also for me: how could we address this? So it would be for me quite interesting to hear from you how we could tackle this. The second issue, and I think that's not a surprise for you at all, is the issue around the grid connection. And the grid congestion remains a pressing issue. So to address these grid issues and the congestion we see all over Europe, we need to invest in more the smart grid technologies and the infrastructure upgrades. So this includes, in my view, the implementation of innovative energy management systems, grid balancing solutions, and also the integration of the renewable energy sources. And the last one is more the financial barriers, also pose as a considerable challenge. What I see and what I heard during the negotiations and all the meetings I had before is that the upfront costs associated with the installation of the charging infrastructure can be discouraging for potential investors. So to overcome this challenge, we need more innovative financial mechanisms. So we need public-private partnerships. We would like to see the target incentives are needed to encourage the rapid expansion of the charging point. And furthermore, the whole promotion, so to say, of the alternative fuels infrastructure is not only about addressing the challenges, but it's also about creating an ecosystem that fosters innovation. So the research and development in charging technologies, energy storage solutions, let's say the smart grid integration, these are the essential components to overcome the hurdles in the deployment of the charging infrastructure. So let me conclude. I really think that the EU AFIR represents a significant step forward in our, let's call it our collective journey towards e-mobility. However, what I see, and you as well, that the challenges such as the interoperability, such as the regulatory difference, such as the financial barriers, must be addressed together by the stakeholders across the industry, but also the government as well. So it's so easy to say, okay, we have to have it now, it's the revised one, and that's it, it's a present and good luck. But we have to work together to build a cleaner, more sustainable future. It still is important that we tackle together these challenges by fostering our collaboration, standardizing the regulation, and incentivize the investments. So in that way, that's the only way we can overcome the obstacles in the deployment of the charging points. And that's the only way to accelerate the adoption of e-mobility across the whole European Union. Thank you so much, and I would like to hand over again to Baerte.
Yeah, thank you very much for this great presentation. And of course, thank you very much for all the labor you've done in the past years. Often people, whether it's in the Netherlands or in France or in Central Europe, are complaining a little bit about Europe and Brussels being slow. But I think the AFIR is an example of really a great ambitious step forward, which is well, a bit of regulation, but together with the market. And yes, it is ambitious and it isn't perfect as well. You mentioned issues of interoperability, which has to be solved, aligning regulation in member states. But well, that is what this webinar is all about the next step, how to implement the AFIR. Thank you very much. I already see some questions popping up. They will be addressed in a Q&A session after the next two presenters. So if you have any questions, feel free to state them. The next speaker I would like to introduce is Raphael from AVERE. AVERE is, well, maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit, Raphael. AVERE is a very strong organization in Europe. The floor is yours. You're muted, Raf.
Thanks a lot. It wasn't working. Yeah, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year to you all. I'm Raphael Heliot, Policy Manager at AVERE. AVERE is the European Association for Electromobility. And today I was asked to discuss a bit, AFIR, the industry perspective or association's perspective, of AFIR. It's been the hottest topic, if I can say, in our ecosystem in Brussels and mostly in our association. And it will continue to be because AFIR, has been adopted, it's been said, but there's still a lot of challenges. Implementation still needs to happen, and there are a lot of secondary legislations that we do need to address at some point, notably in terms of standardization. Quick word about AVERE. So we are the European Association for Electromobility. We represent the entire ecosystem, so being OEMs, CPOs, charging point manufacturers, EV users, public institutions, you name it. The goal is to basically bring everyone and talk about e-mobility and make sure that we have legislations in place that work for the users, but also for the e-mobility industry. So when we talk about AFIR, I wanted to start with the impact on users and car makers before moving and focusing more on the recharging industry. So for users, it's been, it's massive because Caroline and Nagtegaal said it. It provides, clarity and certainty for users that there will be charging stations along EU roads, that there will be, easily available payment services. And for the automotive industry, it's kind of similar. It provides the certainty that there will be enough charging stations for them to produce EVs or e-trucks. It's also, great for price transparency for users, and it streamlines payment options, so you know that you will be able to easily pay at charging points. And lastly, but not least, it provides a promise that there will be EU-wide communication standards to make the experience of recharging easy and user-friendly. So those are, main aspects that are really going in the direction of the users and that we should really consider in the future. For the recharging industry, the main benefit is, of course, market opportunity. There will be a mass deployment of recharging points. So, of course, for CPOs and charging point manufacturers, this is a good opportunity, an economic one. The payment requirements streamlining are also, in a way, an opportunity because it provides, it's standardized the way we approach payment at recharging points. And so it provides clarity and uniformity. However, some of the measures may be a bit too prescriptive in the view of our industry and counterproductive. The example of dynamic QR code is one, with the example of the screen. So for slow charging points, so below 50 kilowatts, you will in the future need a screen to have dynamic QR codes. And this is, raising questions on whether this is productive or not, or if it's counterproductive, in the sense that manufacturers may not be ready to have those screens at charging points, and they may not, be able to continue producing these slow charging points, which are actually essential. We see it in the Netherlands. There's a huge, network of slow charging points, and they have less of an impact on the grid. However, they still, help users recharge their vehicles. So those are questions that we may need to ask ourselves in the future, whether this is going to work out or not. Another opportunity is market standardization and growth. So AFIR, as I said, is a first step, but what we're seeing is there's an opportunity to produce standards and communication protocols. And so this is all part of secondary legislation, of course. The Commission is already working on that together with private stakeholders, including us. And what we're trying to do is, of course, to create a seamless EU-wide recharging market where you can roam freely and you can recharge your vehicle in the easiest of way, and you can also get access to services such as plug and charge, such as V2G. So basically, AFIR is really a first step towards the next big step. So what we always talk about, smart charging, V2G, plug and charge, those are great, but we needed this first step, EU-wide legislation that sets kind of the scene to be able to go further. Standardization of AFIR. So as I said, the European Commission is empowered to adopt delegated acts about technical standards, and it will do so. It's already working on it, as I said. And so it's not just about communication exchange. Of course, it's one of the main aspects, but it's about everything about the standardization about the recharging points. So for example, accessibility of recharging points is also one that's under discussion. Potentially in the future, there will be a standard that will be created at the European level to make sure that the recharging infrastructure is accessible to people with disabilities, which is something that we're also thriving for. So this is, a good opportunity to make sure that we have a recharging infrastructure that's accessible for everyone, being at the communication level between the EV and your recharging point and the recharging point and the grid, but also just the design of it. The benefits of the standardization and protocols. So as I said, it gives the driver easy access to charging points all over the EU, creates new services such as smart charging, plug and charge, V2G, but also provides certainty for stakeholders that are involved in the recharging process. So there's no lock-in effect, there's freedom of choice of service providers, and so on. And there's also the guarantee that your products, whether if you build a product in France and you want to install it in Poland, that product can be used there, and that's that's a major important effect when you live and when you produce in a single market. You need that certainty. Now there's an opportunity to potentially implement OCPP and OCPI. So the regulation provides that opportunity to use widely accepted open protocols such as OCPP and OCPI. Whether that will be OCPP and OCPI is, that remains an open question. Maybe it will be OCPP, OCPI 2.0. It needs to potentially be, better. We need to make sure that we maybe better those protocols. So those are open questions that we need to ask ourselves. And of course, the European Commission is already asking itself those questions. So we all need to be part of that debate now. But what standardization is about, I like to say it's about speaking the same language. There's so many different actors involved in the recharging process, being the user, the power grid, the recharging infrastructure. And when I say recharging infrastructure, we talk about the hardware, the EMSP, the CPO. There are many, many different stakeholders that are involved in this. And so we need to make sure that we speak the same language, And so to do so, communication protocols and standards are the key. And here we have an overview of some of the most dominant standards that are in place currently. So we've mentioned OCPP, OCPI, but of course ISO 15118 is one of them, and there's ISO 15118 -2 and -20, and now the question is whether we go directly to -20, do we include -2? Those are questions that the European Commission also needs to ask itself. There's a tendency from the European Commission right now to go towards -20, but still including -2, so kind of going in parallel direction, making sure we have both so that the existing infrastructure can continue to kind of function, while we also have the next generation infrastructure that can do V2G. So those are aspects that we need to take into consideration, mostly in light of, as it has been said, of the grid. The grid is a major challenge, and so if we want to tackle it, we need to really bring the benefit of flexibility that EVs provide. And so V2G, smart charging, those are aspects that are really key, and we can't do it without standards, without communication protocols. So those are really key aspects that we need to keep in mind. To conclude, opportunities and challenges in implementing AFIR. So I'll start with the opportunities. Standardization of communication protocols. For us, it's a major opportunity. There's a way to create this EU-wide framework that will help users get access to recharging infrastructure anywhere, that will help us get to the next step in creating a seamless EU-wide recharging market and new user-friendly services such as plug and charge. But mostly, it's mostly about making sure that we help the flexibility of EVs gain the market, so that we enable V2G, that we enable smart charging, and we help relieve the pressure on the grid through the flexibility. In terms of challenges, adoption of implementation of new technical standards. It may sound funny, but what standards do we want to put in place? When do we do that? Will there be a retrofit for certain infrastructure? Those are like key questions that we really need to answer in the future. There's also the challenges in implementing payment requirements, as I mentioned. The dynamic QR codes present a real challenge for CPOs and manufacturers, and it threaten a bit the business model of slow charging. So we really need to take that into consideration and make sure that we're not making it too complicated either for slow charging points that are mostly being used around your neighborhood. You don't use slow charging points when you travel far. I mean, you do sometimes, but we need to really take into consideration the behavior of people when they're using slow charging points. And lastly, the difficulties in complying with AFIR requirements in light of the EU grid challenges. So the grid is a major bottleneck. In Brussels, whenever we talk about e-mobility, a lot of people talk about the enablers being the recharging infrastructure. I believe that the recharging infrastructure is ready to ramp up all those recharging points that we need around Europe. However, we really need to make sure that the grid is ready on its side if we want to welcome those recharging points. Of course, we bring flexibility with EVs, but we still need some investment to make sure that our grid is ready, to welcome all those charging points. And maybe a niche point, but I think it's quite a big one when we think about it, linked to the grid. It's AFIR kicks in on the 13th of April, and so most of the provisions of AFIR will start applying on the 13th of April. But when you deploy recharging points, sometimes you have to wait for the grid connection. Our charging points that are being deployed but are still not connected to the grid, you know, will they have to follow the provisions under that apply from the 13th of April or not? And that's, you know, that's a big question, because if you are still waiting for the grid to give you that connection and you don't get it, but then you have new provisions that enter into force and, you know, your installation is not ready or is not compliant with that, then you know, you have a big issue. And so we have to like start thinking more closely, like to bring the dots together between the energy sector and the recharging infrastructure sector. And on this, thank you so much. I'll give back the floor to Baerte, and happy to answer all your questions.
Thank you very much, Raphael, for the great presentation. Great also the offer for answering all the questions, because many are popping in the Q&R line. A lot regarding QR codes, so we'll add that question certainly after the next presentation, because we now have an Open Charge Alliance colleague having the floor. A lot of things are mentioned regarding standardization, how to deploy charging stations based on a European business model, but also local differences in regulation. And Frank, you've been working on a new version of OCPP, which is, in your eyes, compliant with the AFIR. Can you tell us more about this? What have you done? What have you adjusted?
Yes, exactly. Well, that's exactly the part of my presentation. So I will be discussing it in the following slides to tell you exactly how you can use OCPP to comply with AFIR. Just one sec. Are you seeing my slides now at the moment?
We can see your slides. So
yeah. Okay. Excellent.
Go ahead.
Okay. I will speak up a little bit because I think I don't have to explain anymore what AFIR is about. So let's just focus on those AFIR articles that are relevant for electric charging infrastructure, because of course from my role as being responsible for the OCPP development, I've been reading the AFIR as well. And there are only several articles that are really relevant for the communications part. Notably Article number 5, the recharging infrastructure, but I will also just quickly highlight the other articles. There are 2 articles about the targets for charging. So there are basically targets such as how many charging locations you need to place across the 10T network for light duty and heavy duty EVs. This is a very small summary, and looking at the time, I will not go into much more details of this, but you can read the AFIR articles if you want to have the full details. But more important is this article number 5 that really deals with the recharging infrastructure. I will first summarize the requirements in this article, and then I will go later into detail on how you can deal with that using the OCPP. So one important requirement is that you need to provide ad hoc payment, so that publicly accessible stations must always support direct payment with a payment terminal. And it means that every station with a connector capable of more of 50 kilowatts needs to be able to accept payment cards via an internal or an external and outdoor payment terminal. And the smaller charges, like the slow charges or regular charges, they may rely on a mobile app or website, for example, via a QR code. But important is also that if you have any automatic authentication like auto charge or plug and charge, then the customer must always be able to overrule this. So that means that if you have, for example, auto charge or plug and charge enabled, you might need some change in your user interface that you will ask confirmation from the user whether he really wants to do auto charge or whether he wants to use ad hoc payment. So it is not OCPP related, but it will affect your charging station implementation. Then there are several requirements about pricing. One is that pricing must be non-discriminatory, basically meaning that everybody needs to pay the same price at the same location at the same time. So different locations may still have different prices. And the ad hoc price must be based on energy delivered, on kilowatt hours delivered. I'm sorry, I'm just starting somebody with a chainsaw outside. I hope you can still hear me. That makes there also be an idle fee as part of this price. And for EVSEs with a capacity of more than 50 kilowatts of power, the price must be shown on the display of the EVSE. And for smaller chargers, the price can be maybe on a sticker or a sign located near the EVSE. I think it's interesting to mention that there's no requirement to show a running cost on the display. So you need to show the price at the beginning and at the end, but you do not have to show a running cost during the transaction. And MSPs, so card providers, subscription providers, they can have a different price than is shown as the ad hoc price, and they need to be able to show their prices on their own app or their own website. And also interesting to note is that for cross-border e-roaming, you cannot have any extra charges. Then there's a requirement that all stations need to be digitally connected. Well, of course, it is in most cases already the case, of course. And all public charging stations must be capable of smart charging. And interestingly enough, there are no requirements about how and when to use this smart charging, but at least they must be capable to support it. And I assume that it's either going to be the market that decides it, or there may be future regulations that will then tell you under what conditions smart charging becomes mandatory. But at least your stations need to be able to do this. Then there are two other articles that are not that relevant for OCPP, but they are relevant for charging station operators, because they are about the kind of information that the operator needs to provide to the outside world, like static information on the location and properties, and dynamic information on whether a station is available at that time or not, and what the price is. So this typically affects more, for example, the OCPI interface from the charging station operator. Now, the last article that I want to discuss is article number 21. That's about the common technical specifications. This article lists all technical specifications that have been adopted by the commissions, but many specifications are still missing, still not decided upon. And one notable thing is that the charging station protocols with the CSMS or the EV, for example, are not yet defined in this. I mean, even though we know that OCPP is the de facto standard now being used nearly everywhere, it's still not defined in the AFIR. But what is defined are the connector types. And you won't be surprised that for AC it's going to be the type 2, or for DC it's going to be the CCS2. But for the light category of vehicles, so the scooters and the three-wheelers, there's now defined that it's going to be type 3A, so the SCAME connector. Okay, so now what can we do with OCPP to comply with AFIR? And for example, the ad hoc payment, that was the first issue from the Article 5. That requires that we need to support an integrated payment terminal. But as many of you who have been implementing OCPP or charging stations, you know that there's no standardized interface with payment terminals, because they are all proprietary interfaces. And if you do connect a payment terminal, you use credit cards, for example, to pay, there's some additional card data that you need to send to the back office. For example, the last 4 digits of the card or the card type, that kind of information. And you would also like to exchange the cost that needs to be captured on the card, and you want to have some information on whether the payment terminal was able to capture the cost at the end of the session. So for that, in OCPP 1.6, you require some customizations for this, usually using data transfer commands. Well, many stations already have payment terminals in place, and they do use some customizations, but they usually are proprietary or at least manufacturer dependent. So they may be different for different stations or different payment terminals. Now, OCPP 2.01 has several more capabilities. And in OCPP 2.01, you can already send the card information with an authorization command. And you can also return the cost that needs to be captured from the card. Only there's still a custom message required if you want to know whether the payment capture from the terminal was successful or not. So there's still one more customized message you need to do that. And that's why in the latest OCPP release that we're currently working on, and that is expected to be published later this year, in the third quarter probably. This OCPP release, we are standardizing the entire ad hoc payment flow. And we're also, for example, adding a standard message to get the settlement info. You also need to display the prices for the ad hoc session. And in OCPP 1.6, we don't have any messages to control the display, but OCPP 2.01 does offer a set display message that you can use to show the prices. And it may also be very convenient to do the cost calculation locally on the station, because then you can show the prices and the running costs. For example, if you want to do that on the display, and you immediately have the cost available to for the payment terminal to capture it at the end of the session. Well, if you want to support local cost calculation, we have a customization that was published by Open Charge Alliance. It's commonly called the CTAP customization. It was a customization for OCPP 1.6 and 2.01 that was made specifically to meet the Californian requirements, but it's also very suitable in the AFIR situation, and that allows you to do to show prices locally on the station, to do local price calculation and show a running cost. But for OCPP 2.1 that we are working on now, we are adding real tariff plans for local cost calculation. So you can upload your tariffs to the station, and it can be fairly complex tariffs if that is needed. And the whole tariff structure resembles a bit OCPI. It's not the same, but it's possible to do a one-to-one mapping of an OCPI tariff, for example, to the new OCPP tariff. And it's also possible to map the tariffs from Hubject and eClearing.net directly to this format. So with that, you are able to do full local cost calculation on the station. Then I briefly mentioned smart charging. That are requirements for smart charging in AFIR. Well, all OCPP releases as of 1.6 already support smart charging, so that's all dealt with. And then there's also a little bit about bidirectional charging. It's not mandated by AFIR, but there are 2 articles, Article 14 and 15, which are more about the processes and procedures, about the policies and reporting by member states. And they do reference that you need to report about bidirectional charging. For example, Article 15 says that you need to assess every 3 years what the contribution of bidirectional charging is to reducing user and system costs, for example, of your entire network. So they do expect something to be done there. Well, OCPP 2.1 will be fully supporting bidirectional charging, including support for grid codes and everything. So that's all taken care of in OCPP 2.1. So to summarize the capabilities of the various OCPP releases, I think we can say that with OCPP 1.6 and 2.1, you're able to comply with AVERE with a minor customization to support the ad hoc payment, right? Communication with the direct payment terminal. And in OCPP 2.1, we will provide full native support for all these functions, but we're also going to provide an ad hoc customization for OCPP 2.1, where we backport the OCPP 2.1 method for ad hoc payments as a customization to 2.1 and maybe also to 1.6, but that depends a bit on how much that how complex that is going to be for 1.6. But then at least you will have like predefined customizations. So the advantage of a customization that is described by Open Charge Alliance is that it's likely to be adopted by many partners. So even though it is a customization, it's still more or less a standard customization. So then, you'll see that basically 2.1 will support everything from AVERE native out of the box. For 2.1, there's going to be a standard customization available to do that. And in 1.6, you can use the CTAP customization for pricing and the specific payment terminal customization. There's one more thing that I would quickly like to address. That was a remark from Caroline, who said that even though OCPP is used widely, there are still interoperability issues because there are different flavors of OCPPs by different companies. For that, I think it's really important that to use the certification process from Open Charge Alliance. We have a certification process for OCPP 1.6 and 2.1 that if you certify according to that process by an official certification lab, then you are guaranteed to be interoperable with other systems. So this will solve the interoperability problem of OCPP. So with that, I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation, and I think we still have now some time to do the panel discussion. So back to Baerte.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank, for this clear presentation. Now we all know what you've been working on in the last year, in 2023. So you took the AFIR and checked all the boxes if new versions of OCPP is compliant, and also what you're not saying but quite stating, at the moment OCPP is de facto the standard in Europe, in the world. But to have it properly implemented, we rely on local municipalities or provinces who do a tender, who are purchasing charging infrastructure. It's depending on which version they ask for, 1.6, 2.0 or 2.1, and 2.1 in the end is the best because it's checking all the AFIR boxes. And then it's, well, strange or not the time yet for the European Commission to mandate what is widely adopted. But we're not done with legislation. A lot of questions already popped in. I would like to open a little bit of a panel with the previous speakers, but also Lonneke Driessen, the director of the Open Charge Alliance, because there were also some questions popping in on enforcement. How are you going to see that the proper standards and protocols are implemented? I see Frank, I see Lonneke, I see Raphael. Maybe Caroline is gone because there were some commission debates. So we'll save her the question to her at the moment. Well, first of all, welcome, Lonneke, OCPP as a standard. Some questions asked regarding enforcement. Can you reflect a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So in absence of Caroline, because can you hear me, by the way? Okay. So thanks. So regarding enforcement, of course, OCPP or the Open Charge Alliance doesn't enforce a standard, it just provides a standard. And as you already mentioned, when you buy charging stations or you subsidize charging stations, you can, of course, set requirements, and one of those requirements could be OCPP. So in general, globally, it's up to the people who fund charging infrastructure to ask for certain standard and also ask for the certification proof of implementation, as Frank already mentioned. In Europe, there is a possibility to adopt standards into law. So by law, you are obliged. So it's not linked to funding or whatever. But in Europe, if you want to mandate technical specifications, they have to come by law from a subset of standardization organizations, ISO, ETSI, or IEC. This is a fact at the moment, and this applies also to EV charging. And that's the reason why, one of the reasons why OCPP is currently in the process of becoming an IEC standard, so that if the European Union would want to move forward with adopting standards into legislation, then OCPP could be a candidate. But at the moment, this is not yet the case, it's work in progress.
Okay, thank you very much. Also some new questions. Frank did a little bit on advertising OCPP 2.1. So people are asking, when is it released? Where can I find the documents? Frank, Lonneke, maybe you can help them out. Frank?
Yes, I can maybe tell something about it. Currently we're working on OCPP 2.1, so OCA members are participating in that in our what we call the technical working group, where we have regular meetings every other week. And it's accumulating the work of several task groups over the last few years that we had. And one of the main changes of 2.1 is, for example, the whole bidirectional part and the grid codes part and the support for 1511H-20, and also the support for ad hoc payments and standardizing this ad hoc payment flow. So if you're a member of OCA, you can find these documents in our collaboration platform. And we are currently looking at how fast it goes, and if I recall it well, it's probably going to be in the third quarter that we're going to really publish this standard. And but of course, first of course, we need an extensive review by our members of the drafts that we have now before we publish it.
Okay, thank you very much. So if you want to collaborate on the new version, which is facilitating bidirectional charging, but also is fully AFIR compliant, become a member of the Open Charge Alliance, or if you want to be a little bit in the back seat, wait a few months and you can probably download it for free, because it's an open and royalty-free protocol, if I understood correctly. Yeah.
Yes.
Then maybe Raphael, there were also some questions. You highlighted this a little bit on the payment and the QR codes. There's a lot of fuss going on that. You mentioned it in your presentation, but can you dive a little bit deeper? What's the position of AFIR, or is there a process behind it? Is there a follow-up webinar going to be organized, since there are so many questions on this?
Maybe we should definitely organize a QR code webinar. Well, as you know, AFIR, mandates some requirements when it comes to ad hoc payment, and Frank has gone extensively about it. So thanks a lot for that, Frank. But basically, just as a reminder, for new recharging points, there's a difference to be made between recharging points that are above 50 kilowatts and the ones that are below 50 kilowatts. And so for the ones that are below 50 kilowatts, the text says that those charging points may offer devices using an internet connection and allowing for secure payment transactions, such as those generating a specific quick response code, so a QR code. However, generating a QR code basically means that for each transaction, you need a new QR code. That's kind of the thinking behind the text. And so the European Commission is working on guidelines to explain to the industry what the text means, how they interpret it. It won't be a legal text, but it will be an interpretation from the European Commission. And in case there is a need to go in front of the European Court of Justice, the Court of Justice can use that text, but it's not a legal text, it's just an interpretation of the European Commission. And in this, in the draft guidelines that we've seen, what we're seeing is that they are really meaning you need a screen and a generated QR code. So a sticker will not work. And here there's a lot of fuss in the industry, because currently we only have stickers, and a lot of slow charging points don't have the space for a screen, or they don't have the necessary hardware to actually create those charging points. So it's basically challenging CPOs, but also hardware manufacturers to redesign potentially their new recharging points. Again, this only applies to new recharging points, but it is still something that for us is a bit worrying. There's different opinions within the industry, of course, but yeah, for some of our members, it's a bit worrying, because it's challenging the slow charging business model, because it might just kill this business model, which is actually one of the cheapest options to recharge a vehicle. So yeah, I hope I answer the questions in the chat, and I'm not sure I'm I'm responding to the stress that this brings, but
yes, but Raphael, the way I read it, it says such as a QR code. It doesn't seem that it mandates a QR code, so you might also have another solution.
Indeed, yeah, you can also have a payment card readers, but if you want to go for the QR code, it will have to be generated. That's the main aspect that we need to take into account. But yes, indeed, you can have different payment options.
Mute myself. Well, thank you very much. There were many questions on this QR code thing, and of course a deep dive. Lonneke, the question also is, how do the timelines align with the developments in your Open Charge Alliance and the AFIR? You highlighted it a little bit. Open Charge Alliance is growing with a lot of new members. What are the steps you're going to take in 2024 to be prepared for the future?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so one of the important parts, which was already mentioned a couple of times, is the compliance of the standard. So we have a certification program for OCPP 1.6, where you can double check your conformance. And we have a testing tool and certification program for 201. And we are working very hard with a lot of industry players to make sure that we can also open certification program for the additional profiles in 201, maybe a bit too technical. The core part is already open for certification, but the certification program for the additional profiles will be opened very shortly. So that means that if someone who is buying or funding charging infrastructure if they want to be absolutely sure that the standard has been implemented, they can ask for a certificate with one of the by now 8 certification labs globally. So certification is definitely a big focus. Another big focus is the working together with the industry to double check the new features that we are implementing in 2.1. So the discussions in standard is always a combination between experience in the field and combine that with the group discussions. But particularly the experience in the field is really important for us to get feedback whether or not all the additional features we have put in 2.1, if they are actually precise and unambiguous and fully correct. So as what's always the main focus of OCA, still also for this year, working together with the industry, because they are using the standard and they use it in a daily basis and they know what they need and what possibly is missing.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much all. It's exactly 11 o'clock, so we like to be on time, not only with the new version of OCPP, but also for this webinar. It is recorded. You can review it on our YouTube channel at openchargealliance.org. And you can also find the white papers, which give a bit more in-depth knowledge on the slides Frank presented. And of course, if you want to see the slides of Raphael, please go to the AVERE website, become a member of both AVERE and the Open Charge Alliance, of course. And well, we might do a follow-up webinar on the QR code or new versions of OCPP. Thank you very much, and well, have a wonderful year.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.